Hello, I'm Wayne Visser and I'm Director of CSR International, and I'm here today with Matthias Gelber, who describes himself as an environmentalist who happens to live in Malaysia. He was also voted as the greenest person on the planet by a Canadian environmental organization. So welcome to you. We're going to talk today mainly about two issues that you're involved in. One is peat forests and the other is green buildings. So do you want to start us off on the peat forests?
Yeah, hi Wayne, and hi to your friends from all over the world. Greetings from Malaysia. And yeah, peat swamp forests. I mean, I wasn't aware about how significant they are for the regulation of the global climate. A peat swamp forest has about 10 to 15 times more carbon stored in it than a normal forest. That sounds surprising, but it is true, because peats are moist soil. When leaves fall down, they don't decompose, they get sucked up by the moist soil. So you get 2, 5, 15 meters of organic matter building up over time, which is the world's most potent carbon storage. I think after oceans, peat, they only make up 3% of the world's landmass, but they're the second largest storage of carbon. I read once that if we burn the carbon stored in peats, it's equivalent to 80 years of fossil fuel consumption, the CO2 emissions related to that. And what is unfortunately happening is that virtually every year in Indonesia and Malaysia, some of these peats are burning, partially due to illegal activities, to agricultural activities. The problem starts when people lower the water table. Then the peat dries up. It becomes very dry. And if a fire happens, it kind of starts burning, it moves very, very quickly, it's virtually impossible to eliminate, and it has a very negative human health impact. In '97, the worst peat swamp fires in Indonesia and partially in Malaysia released about 2 billion tons, 1 ton is 1,000 kilo, of carbon dioxide. Now we're coming up with all of these expensive carbon storage technologies and mechanisms, and here we've got the world's most potent, naturally given by Mother Earth, carbon storage mechanism. What are we doing to protect it? Now, protecting is not just thou shalt not do. We need to come up with economically viable ways to protect it. We are here in developing countries. It's about economic development in harmony with protecting the environment. We need to find ways how the local population can benefit from preservation rather than from exploitation. We need to look as well at the needs of the states in Malaysia. Often forestry is one of their few ways how they can actually raise money for the state. So we need to actually be able to find mechanisms, transfer in a safe way, transfer of resources to preserve these peat swamp forests. It would be crazy if we destroy the most potent natural carbon storage mechanisms and then spend the money somewhere else for, technologies that are not yet proven and that might cost billions of dollars to suck up CO2. So my plea to you is, and we are involved in some tree planting to restore a peat swamp that is just less than 1 hour outside of Kuala Lumpur, which was initially illegally encroached on. 1,000 hectares were burned down, and we are working with different NGOs, Global Environmental Center, the Forest Department here, the government is providing great support as well, and Sai Baba. We are planting 100,000 trees this year in order to really restore this peat swamp forest again. So we really need good ideas and support from all over the world to preserve the local peat swamps, because they are of incredible climate regulating significance.
Okay, that's very interesting, and understand that Malaysia and Indonesia between them make up most of the world's peat swamps, so this is particularly an issue here. Let's talk a little bit now about green buildings, which is the other area you're involved in.
Yes. I mean, green buildings, approximately 40% of the world's CO2 emissions are associated to construction and buildings. And even research that looked at where can we get best return from investing into carbon emission reduction technologies, the refurbishment and insulation of old buildings and the actual equipment, the greening of new buildings is one of the best value for money ways to reduce CO2 emissions, because we get economic value, a higher value property and less cost for fuel or electricity to heat up our buildings or to cool them down, depending on what part of the world we live. So this is actually a no-brainer. But how to translate that into action? How to help people in poorer communities to get the resources to insulate their buildings, or how to raise the awareness to property developers that new buildings, where often, especially here in this part of the world, it's about cheap building to make maximum profits, where the long-term vision is not there. How can we raise the awareness with end consumers who are going to buy properties, who should give higher value to a property that is going to reduce the CO2 emissions and reduce the energy bill, electricity bill substantially, especially as electricity is going to go up. But one thing that and here in Malaysia, the government is actually providing great support. It supported the Green Building Index that has been launched last year. A lot of developers are working on it, and the government is giving substantial tax incentives for additional expenditure that's related to achieving green building indexes. So the government support is actually very, very good here. But one thing that often gets neglected, and I've seen that in different parts of the world, the building materials itself. I saw a recent statistic from the London Olympics. The calculation is that 67% of the carbon footprint of the whole Olympics will be related to the building materials itself that people are using. Cement, for example, concrete. Hardly anybody knows about it, but it's equivalent to approximately 6 to 7% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions. I mean, that's more than double of all of the planes in the world together. And often we don't look at the building materials itself that we're using. And there are alternatives, low carbon footprint concrete, extremely low carbon footprint concrete that can even be better in performance than normal concrete. My company is, for example, working on that, and other people are working on that. Bamboo as a building material. You know, there are different ways of how you can do it, but we need to start to look at the carbon footprint of the building envelope itself. And those areas, for example, here in Malaysia, hardly you get any points for them because people believe there is no alternative. But these alternatives are growing, and we need the market to support in a very conservative industry. If you come up with a new low carbon footprint construction material, it's difficult to find buyers because people trust what's been there the last 30, 40 years. So we need to support this kind of industry to go massively green. We need to look at passive cooling. You know, if you have a building where the wall is an insulation wall that prevents the heat from coming in hot climates, or prevents the cold air from going out, or in a European context where you have cold winters, you need to prevent the cold from coming in. So we need walls that actually insulate. That is the passive element. In Germany, we've had the passive house. This is a preferred option than a house where we need loads and loads of solar cells to provide the cooling or the heating, because you know, producing those cells in the first place has a massive carbon footprint. I'm a friend of solar energy, but we need to find the best, lowest carbon footprint solutions, so passive solutions should be preferred. But it's a great time. We are globally trying to focus in on areas where we can make a difference, and green buildings is definitely an area. And if you are a listener, look at the carbon footprint of the building that you're moving in. Try and support those developers that are going green. Try and support those people that try alternative building technologies and building materials to massively lower the carbon footprint. That is what it's all about. It will benefit us and future generations. Hi from Malaysia, and go green, make it happen large scale in your life and other people's lives.
Thanks very much. Cheers.